Welcome back, everybody. Today I want to talk about the books that had the most influence on my life. This is going to be a long list, so I'm breaking it up into 3 parts. The first one is going to be books that really influenced me from about elementary school through high school. The first book that really had a huge impact on me was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I don't have a copy of that book anymore, so I'm going to try something new and just kind of put the cover right here. Right here. Jurassic Park. Now, honestly, I wouldn't have even read this book, I bet, if it weren't for the movie. But the movie came out when I was about 9 years old. And I think I was maybe having some nightmares at the time. And so my parents were a little reluctant to let me see a movie where the commercials were very clearly showing that it was going to include some dinosaur on human violence, which might have terrified me as a child. However, I was desperate to see this movie. I was annoying them at every opportunity to please just allow me to see this movie when it came out in theaters. I knew my dad had the book though. He had like a storage container in a cardboard box under his bed that just was full of these mass market paperbacks. And so I tried to convince them that if I could read the book, then I could clearly handle the story, and then they would have to let me see the movie since I already knew everything. So I read it, and it was really hard to grasp as a 9-year-old. I did not understand all the scientific discussions that these characters were having. But I pushed through because I was determined. I finished the book and was eventually allowed to see the movie. From then until like near the end of high school, that was really the type of book that I read. My dad's storage container had Michael Crichton, John Grisham, Tom Clancy, Clive Cussler. I just read all of their books all the time because it felt cool, especially in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Reading books that seemed like they were more for adults made me feel smart. That cardboard box of books under my dad's bed really brought me into a different world of literature than I had been in before. And that's kind of what I want to do with these videos. I want to introduce you to books that you might not be familiar with otherwise. Let me be your under-the-bed book daddy. The next book that had a big impact on me was The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen. I don't have a copy of that either, so we're going to do the same thing here. The Corrections is here. I first heard about this book in 2001 because Oprah selected it to be in her book club. And at the time, Franzen publicly came out and said that he wasn't quite so sure that he wanted his book to be in Oprah's book club because he really didn't like the types of books that she had put in her book club in the past. He didn't want his high and mighty, very fancy literary novel to be considered in the same group as some of the other books that she had chosen. This was actually like a huge literary publishing world controversy at the time. Oprah actually disinvited him from her show. I thought all of this behind the scenes drama was super interesting, and so The Corrections was the first book that was like serious literary adult fiction that I read on purpose that wasn't something that was just assigned to me at school. And it had a major impact on me. Really, the content itself really stunned me. I hadn't ever read a book before where there were no good guys. Everybody was just a terrible person. And it hadn't really occurred to me that there would be scenarios in life where there's just no good guy around. It's just all bad people. And more than that, when you're that age, it sometimes doesn't occur to you that adults don't have everything figured out. This was the first book I read where adults were just monsters and self-centered and self-absorbed. And that's a complete departure, especially from the stuff that I had been reading before. All of the Tom Clancy's and Clive Cusslers and John Grisham's have a clear-cut good guy and bad guy, and it made an impression on me. Even more than that, this was the first book that I had read where I could actually understand the beauty of individual sentences or paragraphs. I had never read a book before where I would just kind of stop at the end of a page and think, oh my god, this is art. This is just so well crafted. This was the first book that really made me realize that writing can be beautiful. Now, there are a lot of people out there who absolutely hate Jonathan Franzen, and I totally get that. I do continue to read his novels when they come out. I haven't read The Corrections since I was about 17, so I don't still vouch for its quality, but I do remember at the time it having a big impact on me, and so I do still appreciate it for that sake. The last one on today's list is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and that's going here. No, let's put it over here, this side. The summer after high school, I was hanging out with some friends who I thought were way smarter than me. So when I was hanging out with them and they all started talking about this book that they had all somehow read, it wasn't like assigned to them in class. They had just all individually read this novel on their own, and I felt like a complete idiot for having never even heard of it. And so when I left that hangout, I went straight to the bookstore and picked this up on my way home so that I could read it and feel like I was smart, like my friends. The story follows 7 generations of a family called the Buendias in a fictional Colombian town called Macondo. Just like how the corrections had a huge impact on me in terms of sentence structure, 100 Years of Solitude had that same impact on me in terms of story. I'd never read a story where I was just blown away by the story itself, the beauty and poetry of the story of the novel. I'd also never read any magical realism before, and I think that Marquez, especially in 100 Years of Solitude, pulls it off so well. For the most part, like 95% of the novel, everything is very realistic. It's realistic fiction. But there's little bits and pieces of the story that bring a sense of magic and wonder to it. It was a completely new way of telling a story. I had really never read anything like it. And a huge part of that, I think, was that I had never really read an author who wasn't either American or British. This was my first exposure to world literature, and it changed the way I thought about books and storytelling as a whole. After that, I started seeking out literature from all over the world because I didn't really know what kinds of stories I could be missing without reading such a wide variety of authors. There are so many things to be learned from authors who live in entirely different worlds than you. And for me, 100 Years of Solitude was a great introduction to that lesson. Those were the most influential books of my life from elementary school through high school. The second part of this list will be up next week. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Close the laptop, put the phone away, pick up a book. I'll see you next time.